can you tell me what are your expectations from today's course? What have you shared? What would you like to take from today? Why are you here?
To get the tip about
yes.
how to get my paper published.
Good, perfect.
Yes, international journal.
Yes, excellent. Okay, I will certainly try to provide lots of tips. Yeah. Other people, expectations or hopes from the course? Okay, who's ever had a paper rejected? Who's never had a paper rejected? You have submitted? Yeah.
I've never published.
You haven't published yet, okay. Believe me, however successful you are, you will get papers rejected. It's just one of those things. Who has, had difficulty choosing a journal? Been not sure about, yeah? Who has ever had difficulty deciding who should be an author on a paper? Disagreement with colleagues, maybe? Again, I have, yeah. They're all common problems, and one reason I wrote my book was because the information is scattered. It's all over the place, and I think the journals really expect us to be telepathic. They expect the information just somehow to magically get into our brains. And I was lucky because I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a long time, and I was writing papers but not actually doing the research. I could develop a lot of experience working with the journals. If you have to do the research and then write the paper, you may be only submitting 3 or 4 papers each year. It gets harder. If you're submitting 20 papers because you have only helped with the writing, then it becomes easier. But I do think a lot of it comes from experience and practice. So the aim of today's course is very much to think about not the writing of the paper. We're not going to think about the structure so much or the language, but what I call the publication strategy. So how to choose the best journal, how to approach the journal, working out how long it will take, how many papers to produce, that sort of thing. Thinking then particularly about authorship. I think that's an area that is particularly difficult. There are guidelines, but they're not so easy to follow, and they don't seem to apply to every situation, and that can be an area that I want to particularly talk about. It's actually the reason that I got interested in publication ethics was I was working as a writer, as I say, in a company. So I was not an author necessarily. In fact, I usually was not an author because I had not done the research. I had not designed the experiment. I hadn't collected any data. I was simply helping with the writing. And so I was really a technical assistant. And that made me interested because it's very different in science. The idea of authorship in literature, if I write a poem, I'm obviously the author. The writer and the author are the same thing. But in science, I think it's more difficult to decide, well, you did some important work on the design, somebody else did the statistical analysis, somebody else collected the data, somebody else worked on the publication. How do you decide how to acknowledge all those different people? Selecting the right target journal, I think, is the key to success. A lot of times, I think we're perhaps too ambitious. We go for a very top journal when really actually our work, I would say those top journals are for maybe once or twice in our scientific career. We can't be publishing in Nature and Science every time. It's just not possible. So we have to be realistic and we have to think, what is my work most suitable for? And then we can avoid rejection because we've really chosen the right journal. So I want to start by thinking about policies and strategies and plans. And I find that people sometimes get a bit confused by those different terms. And even though I wrote a whole book about strategy, I sometimes also get a bit confused by what is meant by those different things. I think also when you work as an academic, you maybe don't think so much about whether you need a publication strategy. But I would argue that wherever you're working, it's helpful to plan your publications. They're very important, so it's helpful to think about them in a logical way and not just rush into publishing after you've done the research.